Hey everybody, this is Katie Buckholtz, and I'm with the the new company of Sightview Software, and I'm on the Sightview Software MIPS team, and just wanted to welcome you to our first webinar with the Sightview name. Today's webinar is MIPS 101. It's what your practice should know. So this is just basically we're going bare bones. Like if you were like had any questions or concerns that you were like too embarrassed to ask somebody or anything, give me a shout. I'll have my email at the end, but I'm hoping to cover all of the basics in today's webinar. Sometimes we'll have new physicians, new clinicians who just want to know what the program is. And then also too, sometimes we have new office staff who have recently been assigned to manage MIPS. So this is designed with that in mind. Just going with what your practice should know. All right, so before we begin, this presentation this is a general disclaimer here, not a legal document. It's not a full representation of the MIPS program. And the two things at the bottom of the screen, the website for the quality payment program, that's going to be your best friend when you're trying to learn about MIPS. Or you can give us a call and we can help you out too. And then the email is for the quality payment program itself. All right, so it's me. I'm your speaker today. I've had the pleasure of assisting tons of clinicians and tons of practices with MIPS and regulatory programs. And I'm super proud to be a part of the Sightview MIPS team. Our crew is just fantastic and their knowledge base is just off the charts. So like I said, if you guys have any questions, give us a shout. But anyway, I will start our MIPS 101 webinar here. So let's look at the agenda for today. When I think of MIPS, I maybe think of it too simply, but I think of it kind of as a game. So I kind of highlighted some little game pieces here. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what is MIPS, and then we're going to talk about the importance that it holds for your financial reputation and your physician reputation themselves. We're going to go over some of the rule book basics, and we're going to talk about the 4 categories that make up your MIPS score. And then we're also going to talk about the future of this program. So as we're looking here, let's chat about what is MIPS. So I'm going to give a little bit of a backstory because it helps to understand the purpose of the program and the reasoning behind a lot of the rules and requirements that you'll see. So history lesson, Medicare basically revamped its payment model with a new law in 2015. Well, why? Well, the old model, which was called the sustainable growth rate, it turned out to be not so sustainable. It was a fee-for-service model, which basically you perform a service and then you get paid for it. And that's traditionally been the standard payment model where healthcare providers are reimbursed when they deliver services to patients. So Medicare realized, we're having some financial difficulties with this. So what we're going to do is there was a new law that was created in 2015. It was called MACRA because we need more acronyms. Macronyms. Ha. Okay. Anyway, so MACRA stands for the Medicare Access and CHIP Reauthorization Act. Basically, it's bipartisan law that changed the way Medicare rewards clinicians. It was at the time considered the largest scale change to the American healthcare system since the Affordable Care Act in 2010. And the goals of the law are moving Medicare from a fee-for-service program, that old sustainable growth rate program, to what's called value-based care. And that's where clinicians are paid based on the quality of services that they provide. And hence, that value-based care program is called the Quality Payment Program. So now, while value-based care is a newer approach, that incentivizes providers to focus on quality outcomes rather than the quantity of services rendered. Um, CMS now has the ability to reward high value, high quality Medicare clinicians with payment increases, while at the same time reducing payments to clinicians who aren't meeting performance standards. Um, so while fee for service, the old model, has been kind of the norm for decades, many experts argue that value-based care is the way of the future, as it has the potential to improve patient outcomes and reduce overall healthcare costs. The tricky part from a practical standpoint is that sometimes it's hard to quantify quality. So needless to say, the shift to value-based care model has been challenging. Um, so now that we have like a backstory of what led to the creation of this quality payment program, let's talk about it. So it is the name of the Medicare Value-Based Care Program, and there are essentially two tracks. The Merit-Based Incentive Payment System, MIPS, and Advanced Alternative Payment Models. Now, we're focusing on MIPS, and if you are a MIPS eligible clinician, you will be subject to a performance-based payment adjustment through the MIPS participation track. Now, eventually, Medicare wants to retire the traditional MIPS program and move MIPS eligible clinicians to a different track called MIPS Value Pathways, or MVPs. This is being implemented gradually. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but for now, we are all dealing with the game of MIPS in 2024, and as I said, it helps for me to think of it as a game. So as we begin to review the rules of play here in today's presentation, please keep in mind that for every standard rule to MIPS, there is almost always some kind of exception to it. And to make it more of a moving target, the rules change from year to year, and the exceptions to the rules change throughout the year. And that's where the team I work with, the Sightview MIPS team, can help. We stay on top of those changes so you don't have to. So as always, feel free to reach out if it becomes overwhelming, and we can help you through it. All right, so let's get into a few specifics of why MIPS matters, because this will help us to understand the reason for the program and then the reason why we need to pay attention to it. And it's basically because you need to know that the stakes are high if you don't do well and play by the rules. And that's very important to convey. So let's go to our next part here. And let's talk about two things, why MIPS matters to your clinic. The first one, there's two main reasons. First one, there is the financial impact. And that is especially true if a clinician sees mostly Medicare patients. And the more Medicare eligible patients you see, the increase, it basically increases that you'll have to participate in MIPS. So, so there's basically financially. Let's look at the 2-year cycle. So there's a 2-year lag between a performance year, which is when you earn your MIPS score, and the payment year, which is when you are reimbursed for your MIPS score. Now, one of the big impacts for clinics is that the payment year isn't a one-time check. The reimbursement is in the form of what are called payment adjustments. And those are based off of your MIPS final score from 2 years earlier. So an example here on the screen, MIPS scores will translate into Medicare Part B payment adjustments. They're earned off of the 2024 performance year, and then they'll be associated with the 2026 payment year. Now, those payment adjustments, like I said, are not a one-time check. They're applied on a claim-by-claim basis. So every Medicare Part B that you put in, you can receive a positive, a neutral, or a negative payment adjustment. Positive payment adjustments will increase the amount that you're reimbursed. Negative payment adjustments decrease the amount that you're reimbursed. And neutral payment adjustments don't change the amount that you're paid. All right. So let's also talk about the financial reimbursement in a little bit more detail. So here's how the payment adjustments are going to apply for your performance year of 2024, and then the payment adjustment for 2026. So again, that 2-year lag. Now, as we look at this chart here, the 2026 payments are on the right side, 2024 score is on the left side. Now, you'll see here that 75.01 to 100, and your final score is based out of 100 points. So 75.01 to 100 will net you a positive payment adjustment. Now, these are also awarded on a sliding scale. So a positive payment adjustment will be higher for a clinician with a score of 100 than for a clinician with a score of, like, let's say 80. 75, if you score an even 75 out of 100, you'll get a neutral payment adjustment, which means nothing more, nothing less than what the fee schedule is. And then if you score 0 to 74.99, that is a negative payment adjustment. And at the very low end of the score, you can receive up to a -9% taken off all of your Medicare Part B reimbursements. So that's become a very, very scary number. So what does this mean practically? Let me draw your attention to this sidebar on this slide. Now, this is an example of how a MIPS score translates to a payment adjustment. So we have a clinician, and the clinician, unfortunately, earned a MIPS score of 5 out of 100 in 2024. All right. That will garner that clinician a -9% payment adjustment on all Medicare Part B claims in 2026. So if we put that into numbers, the clinician bills, let's say, $130,000 in Medicare Part B claims in 2026. Based on their MIPS score in 2024, the clinician will lose $11,700 in 2026. So that just kind of gives a little bit of a perspective there on what's at stake financially. All right. Now, so where does the money for the positive payment adjustments come from? So it comes from the money that is taken away from clinicians who receive a negative payment adjustment. So remember the problem with the old fee-for-service payment model? Well, Medicare couldn't keep up financially with that payment model, with cost of living increases, inflation, et cetera. So, as required by the 2015 MACRA law, CMS or Medicare must implement MIPS payment adjustments in a budget neutral manner. Now, basically what that means is the agency, Medicare, may not pay out more in incentive payments than it recoups in penalties. All right, so bottom line, Medicare does not contribute additional money to payment adjustments. More low scoring clinicians mean more money for high scoring clinicians. And so that is what's meant by a budget neutral program. All right. Next up, the second reason why MIPS really matters to your clinic is it deals with physician reputation. And it also deals with a clinic reputation. So it's more than just financial impacts. With the value-based care payment model, the financial and reputational impacts of the MIPS score are attached to a clinician, even if the clinician changes organizations or practices. That is kind of a natural byproduct of the 2-year time lapse between the performance year and the payment year. So here's an example, and we'll look at the little sidebar here. Let's say a clinician has a single 2024 final score and they received it at practice A. That clinician leaves practice A and is now over at practice B, and they're billing under the practice B tax ID number during the 2026 payment year. The consequence of the move with MIPS is that the clinician and the clinic associated with the clinic B will be given the payment adjustment that the clinician earned when they were at the first clinic in 2024. So basically that clinician, when they changed clinics, took their MIPS score with them, and the new clinic will receive the payment adjustment that the clinician earned at the old practice. So honestly, it's not only just a reputational impact, like on their like a clinician's resume, basically, it becomes a financial impact for the new clinic who employs that physician. In addition to all of this, every historical MIPS score earned by a clinician is a permanent part of the publicly reported record that is released and maintained by Medicare. So if a patient is searching for a Medicare provider and that Medicare provider had to participate in MIPS, that provider's score shows up on the Medicare provider search website in the form of a star rating. And now, so that becomes a big deal when it comes to public reputation management and ensuring the influx of new patients to your practice. If they see a star rating based off of your MIPS score, they may be more inclined to go to a clinician who has a higher rating than one who has a lower rating. And these scores are updated. Clinicians can check their scores and how the public sees their scores at the website up on the screen. All right. And let's move on here. We've covered the history, we've covered the hard-hitting impacts of the MIPS program. Hopefully everyone's still awake. Let's now dive into the rule book, as it were. Now, if you're new to MIPS, you'll find out really fast that there are common acronyms that are frequently thrown about. And on this slide here, by the way, the slide deck will be provided to all attendees after the webinar here. So you'll have this little kind of cheat sheet of, okay, what does MIPS stand for? When somebody talks CMS, what are they talking about? What's an EUC? Those sort of things. Just some basic acronyms here. All right, so kind of got the language going here of, the different language of MIPS, I guess. So let's start to look at what makes a clinician eligible to participate in the game. Now, there are a few different levels of participation, and the different levels will determine whether a clinician only reports if their fellow clinicians are in a tax ID number are reporting, or whether a clinician has to report regardless of whether their fellow group clinicians report. But that is based off of 3 criteria. And the criteria encompasses billing, patients, and services. So those 3 criteria all together is what is called the low volume threshold. And the metrics to qualify for reporting, as you see here, if you bill more than $90,000 for Medicare Part B covered professional services, for the patients aspect, you have to see more than 200 Medicare Part B patients. And for the services aspect, you have to provide more than 200 covered professional services to Medicare Part B patients. So the low volume threshold, this participation criteria, is analyzed by Medicare. And then Medicare looks at the criteria during 2 different timeframes. And this time span is called the MIPS determination period. So let's look at what that entails. Okay, so the MIPS determination periods for 2024, for example, are based off of 2 12-month periods and whether the clinician met the low volume threshold that we saw on the previous slide, whether the clinician meets that during the first segment, the second segment, and then those 2 are reconciled and the clinician learns whether or not they're eligible for MIPS. So here's how it works for 2024. CMS looks at where a clinician was and with whom the clinician was billing from October 1st, 2022, so it's a couple years ago, to September 30th, 2023. All right, so that first segment, we can get an idea of where a clinician might be required to report with. And we can look on the Quality Payment Program website. So the preliminary eligibility is posted. It was posted back in January. So that can give us an indicator of where a clinician will be required to report. The second segment for 2024 is currently going on. And that segment started in October of last year, and it goes through September, I apologize here, September 30th of 2024. I need to correct that. So once the second determination period is finished, the final eligibility is determined. So that's that'll tell us whether a clinician has to report for 2024. The tricky part is it's released in November or December of this year. So we have to take more of an educated guess, pardon me, and think of, okay, if a clinician was here for the first segment, but not at our clinic for the second segment, what will that mean for our reporting needs? Or if a clinician came after the second segment was over, will they need to be on our list of physicians to report? Or let's say a physician, as an example, comes in during the second segment to a clinic. Depending on whether that physician meets the low volume threshold, they may or may not be required to report for this year. So there's looking at those timeframes that really impacts has a lot of fallout from when a clinician joins a practice. All right, next we're going to talk about participation. So if you want to check your participation, and I really recommend that you check your eligibility status like now, even though it's preliminary. What you do is you can go to two different places here. It's both are on the Quality Payment Program website. The easiest way is to sign in and create an account so you can access like your full clinic's information. That's the easiest way, especially if you're a larger group. It's way easier to look at the overall group eligibility and look one by one on a list of physicians rather than entering the NPI number individually, which is the second little window on the right here. That one you can just enter NPIs and see what the current eligibility is. But you also want to make sure that come November, December, make sure you come back and know for sure where your clinicians are going to need to report and with whom, because sometimes it might surprise you. So get an idea right now, and then definitely come back later in the year and check on final eligibility. All right. Okay, so we've talked about all of these intro things. Let's get into 4 categories, 1 score. So your MIPS score, this is how the game is scored basically. Your MIPS score is based out of 100 points. There are 4 categories that make up your MIPS score: quality, cost, promoting interoperability, and improvement activities. And all of those contribute a certain weight to the final score. Now, those percentages there can change due to special statuses, exception applications, or if a physician becomes eligible to participate in the other payment model that is not MIPS. So always check the Quality Payment Program library frequently, but in general, this is the traditional MIPS percentage weight for the categories. So each category that makes up a final score has its own rules. So I like to think of it as like a triathlon. So in a triathlon, there are 3 events within the big overall event. And each of the 3 events has its own rules, but an athlete's final placement status is based on the performance in all 3 events. So think of a MIPS final score kind of in the same way. There are 4 events or categories within the overarching MIPS program, and a clinician's final score is based off of the performance in each of the 4 events or categories that ultimately make up that final score. And we're going to next go into each of these categories and just do kind of a brief overview as to the purposes, the tracking mechanisms, general rules, and this is very high level. So they're like very, very high level. So when you want to learn more about it, the Quality Payment Program has excellent resources. Reach out to our team. We're happy to help. So let's go back to our slide here. Let's look at the quality score. So this category, the basic purpose is to assess the quality of care that a clinician delivers as evidenced by performance on quality measures. Quality measures are tools that Medicare uses to assess healthcare processes, outcomes, and patient experiences to ensure that they align with Medicare's goals for healthcare. For services basically to be effective, safe, efficient, patient-centered, equitable, and timely. Now, there are various types of measures available for quality reporting, and there's such as outcome or high priority measures. And then when you look at the tracking mechanism, so how does CMS track your measures? There are 5 collection types for MIPS quality measures. Now, the majority of our audience uses a combination of collection types and submits them using what's called a data registry, such as the American Academy of Ophthalmology's IRIS registry or MRO's Polaris registry, etc. These registries are certified by the government, and they are authorized to collect and submit data in behalf of clinicians. So some registries and some collection types are not available to everyone. There are certain parameters that qualify clinicians to use them. So we've got what are called electronic clinical quality measures, clinical quality measures, qualified clinical data registry measures, Medicare Part B claims measures, and the CAPS for MIPS survey. Now, the tracking duration for 2024 will run January 1st of 2024 to December 31st, 2024. And your goal is to get a score of 60. So within this category, the top score is 60. And the general reporting rules are as follows. You'll need to submit collected data for at least 6 quality measures, including 1 outcome measure or high priority measure in the absence of an applicable outcome measure, or complete a specialty measure set. Now, since your goal is to get 60 points, here's a hint, try to choose 6 measures that have the possibility to give you 10 points each. Not all measures will award you the same number of points. It changes from year to year, it changes within the year, but try to pick measures that will get you as close to 10 points each, because as you see, 6 times 10 would get you 60, and that would be your max score for the category. Now, also new for 2024, we will need to report performance data for at least 75% of the denominator eligible cases for each measure. It's called data completeness. And this is an increase from the previous data completeness threshold of 70. So basically, 75% of your patients who qualify for a measure that you're reporting on, you have to have 75% of them at least reported in order to successfully meet data completeness for a quality measure in 2024. All right, next up, weighted just as much as the quality category is the cost category. Um, Cost category, the purpose is intended to assess performance among clinicians in terms of their cost efficiency. So basically, this category highlights your billing accuracy and with whom you coordinate patient care, because different clinicians that are even outside of your clinic can have an impact, for better or worse, on your cost category score. I know with our team, the Sightview MIPS services team, we've spent countless hours getting this category ironed out for our clients. So if you need help, you need an extra set of eyes, you're confused about something, give us a shout. Now, so the overall purpose is, like I said, to assess performance among clinicians in terms of their cost efficiency. The tracking mechanism is Medicare administrative claims data. So this is where the accuracy of your billing will come to the fore. The tracking duration is from January 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2024. And our weight here, as you can see, is 30%, just the same amount as our quality category. And if you, just as a side note, if you don't meet the established case minimum, and there's 29 measures, each has a different purpose and a different case minimum. If you don't meet the established case minimum for any of the cost measures, the cost performance category will be re-weighted in your final score. So the 30% will be distributed to other performance category or categories. So like I said, 29 possible cost measures, each has a different purpose and a different case minimum and targets a different specialty. All right, now we're on to promoting interoperability. When we look at promoting interoperability, this category is tracked with two different mechanisms. One is your certified EHR, or electronic health record software, and also some self-completed documents that you have to keep on file. Tracking duration is a minimum 180 continuous days. Now that's different from last year and the years past. Last year and years past, we needed 90 continuous days. Now we're at 180 continuous days. The score for the category itself maxes out at 100. And then that's whatever your score is reweighted to 25% of your final score. Now, a couple of rules here. You have to submit collected data for the required measures in each objective, unless you have an applicable exclusion. You also have to provide, when you're attesting and reporting your data, you have to provide your EHR's identification code from the Certified Health IT product list. And basically, it puts together all of the different modules that you use to create a CMS identification code. You also have to perform what's called a security risk analysis every year, and at least update it once a year, and keep track of that. That also comes into play with HIPAA too, so a little bit of, cross-program requirement there. New for 2024, we have to complete the safety assurance factors for EHR resilience guides measure. There's a measure that is required this year. Last year, we could just say yes or no to whether or not it was done. This year, we have to complete one of the segments of that workbook. And then we also have to answer the required attestations, and those pop up when we're submitting data. All right, last category, improvement activities. This part is 15% of your final score. Now, this tracking mechanism is very interesting because it is completely self-completed documents to prove that you have completed an activity. So it's a lot less than, it's not a numerator denominator type of attestation that you did this activity. It's a checkbox. And then when you're audited, you have to provide the documentation that CMS is looking for. So Side note, if you need help with picking out improvement activities, our team has improvement activity kits for sale, and they basically take the guesswork out of documentation and they provide a record for MIPS audits. And then let's see here. Tracking duration is a minimum continuous 90 days. A side note, if you're doing more than one activity, those dates do not have to coincide in the same 90-day period. So let's say you're doing 2 different activities, they don't have to be the same 90 days. Your category score goal is 40 out of 40. Different activities will have different weights associated with them. There's high-weighted activities, which will give you more points, and medium-weighted activities, which will give you fewer points. And certain clinicians will receive double points depending on their qualifying special status. So like small practices will get double the points for each activity. Now the weight in the final score is 15%. And just make sure that you document your activity, because the proof of activity completion, which is a data validation, is specified in each activity on the Quality Payment Program website. And like I said, when it comes time to report at the end of the year, it's a check mark, but when you get audited, it becomes so much more than a check mark. And basically your goal is when the audit comes, you pick up your improvement activity file and you send it on over in the means that the auditor is requesting. All right, so we're headed towards the end of the webinar here. Let's look at the future of MIPS. MIPS is eventually going to end, traditional MIPS that we were talking about today. Starting in 2023, MIPS value pathways began and subgroup reporting began. Heads up to our ophthalmology friends out there. Next year, CMS is proposing to have a MIPS value pathway for ophthalmology. And that will have different requirements than the regular MIPS program. So the ultimate goal is to move traditional MIPS and then moving it where that traditional MIPS is sunset, and then MIPS value pathways will become a mandatory reporting feature in a future year. So you can see the timeline here. So, you know, stay on top of, especially ophthalmology folks. Keep an eye out on the when the final rule comes out, usually in November, to see if the MIPS value pathways will be required for you for next year, or an option for you for next year. And then also look for, we're happy to provide assistance with moving you to the MIPS value pathways track as well. All right. And now here's contact information. Give us a shout. We have different levels of service, from bare bones, attestation help to, let's white glove. We'll help you basically like a MIPS employee for your clinic. So give us a shout. Also talk to us about different pricing structures. If you're interested in the improvement activity kits, give a holler. Also too, I'm happy to do a free consultation just to see and advise. Maybe you just need some part-time help or some part-time advice, or maybe you need some more help while you're getting your feet under you with the regulatory programs. But give a shout. We're here to help. All right, guys, thank you so much, everybody. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar. We'll send out the slides, and I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and looking forward to providing more webinars in the future. Thanks so much, guys, and have a great day.